Hey, it's your guy. Look, the other day I got an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Marni Hill Foderaro. She's an educator, speaker, and an award-winning and celebrated author. She earned her doctorate in education from Northern Illinois University and completed postdoctoral studies at Harvard. Listen in as Dr. Foderaro talks to me about her STEs, spiritually transformative experiences, and how those experiences influenced the writing of her award-winning book, God Came to My Garage Sale. I'm telling you, this interview is packed with goodness. So let's do this. Welcome to Hindsight, the podcast with your boy, Lee Jones.
Hindsight is 2020, hindsight is key. To learn that, you don't need no type of degree. Learn from the past, see what the present gon' be. I'm a wise man, look at these blessings on me. Hindsight is 2020, hindsight is key. To learn that, you don't need no type of degree. Learn from the past, see what the present gon' be. I'm a wise man, look at these blessings on me. The Hindsight Podcast, hosted by Lee Jones, the one and only, my homie, bringing the past to the present and affecting the future for the better.
Hey, Dr. Marni, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing all right, Lee. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much for coming on Hindsight, the podcast. I really appreciate it. Just really quick, Dr. Marni is an excellent guest, even before we get started, because I did have some technical difficulties. I'll say technical, but it was life technical difficulties this morning, and we had to adjust our interview time, and she was very accommodating. So thank you so much, Doctor. I really appreciate it.
Well, no worries. Life happens and we need to be flexible. So it's all good.
Before we jump into all the fun stuff that you're going to tell us about, I'd like to always try to get a little personal a little bit. And I start off with a very simple question. And it is, what do you do for fun?
Well, I live in the Caribbean now after a lifetime in the Chicago suburbs. So my fun consists of swimming and snorkeling in the ocean and hiking the rainforest.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds amazing. The only time I've really been in a true, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a true rainforest was when I was in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, well, I've lived very close to Puerto Rico.
Okay.
I'm in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, so I'm just a pedal jumper away from Puerto Rico, and yes, that is the rainforest.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't do any hiking, but I did get an opportunity to enjoy the beauty. So I'm a little jealous that you're over there. I look at a lot of the shows where the people are looking to purchase homes on islands. I don't know if you've ever watched that show.
Yeah, I have. Actually, I even looked at some of those homes that were featured. I don't really care for those shows in that, they're so kind of orchestrated and fake. These people have already bought their homes and then they go through these kind of really orchestrated dialogues. But I actually did look at some of those homes. But after about a 3-year search, I found the perfect place for me. And I'm glad I landed in the Caribbean. But actually, I will tell you that, I can find beauty wherever I live. And, so I spent a lifetime in the Chicago suburbs. And, that was a beautiful place to live as well.
Absolutely. I agree. Now, I say I agree, sort of tongue in cheek, because I've never really been in Chicago. But what I'm saying, I agree, is that you can find that beauty anywhere you go.
Yes.
I did 26 years in the Army, and my first duty station, growing up and living in Maryland, my first duty station was on Alaska.
Wow.
And from that was a great experience because you realize that you can find beauty anywhere, right?
Definitely.
Even in the Army, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your service and what you have done to help our world. We're definitely needing needing help now, and and people are looking at hindsight in general, just in their lives, and
Yeah,
trying to make sense of some of the things that they've experienced.
absolutely. Dr. Marnie, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're an author, an award-winning and celebrated author and speaker. But tell us a little bit that's well, that's not really where you are now. That's some of your accomplishments. But tell us a little bit about, go in hindsight and tell us a little bit about yourself and in a quick overview of your journey to where you are now.
A little bit about me is was born in Miami, Florida, but just shortly thereafter moved to the North Shore of Chicago, Illinois, and, went off to college at an early age. I became a teacher. In fact, just 3 years ago, I retired from a 35-year career as a special education high school teacher. 12
Wow.
of those years, I was a university graduate school adjunct professor. So definitely always had a love of learning, and was so excited to realize my dream of having a family. Got married and had uh, two beautiful children. And but I realized after about 27 years of marriage that I was kind of living in a false reality, that the American dream that I thought I was immersed in, with the white
Hmm.
picket fence and everything, was not really reality. And the values that I had and I continue to have, of honesty and compassion and love and fidelity and fiscal responsibility and love of family, they were not aligned with the person I was married with. Those weren't the same values that he had. And I,
Okay.
had to make a very tough decision, but I filed for divorce, and I left that situation, not really realizing the significant losses that I would endure. Material losses such as my home, assets, and money, but I also lost my two adult children to parental alienation.
Oh,
And,
wow.
having to,
Yeah.
and this happens to men and women, and it's a devastating family dynamic that is very, very hard to cope with and understand after, in my case, 2 decades of a loving, normal range, relationship with your kids, just to have them ripped away. It's really like experiencing the death of your living children. And so, I've had to really kind of step back and do a deep dive into my own intergenerational family trauma to understand in hindsight, what made me a target for an abuser, or what made me someone who did not have strong boundaries, or
Okay.
so that is what led me on my writing journey. And I first wrote a book after, when I had to have a garage sale, but I experienced some miracles. And that book is God Came to My Garage Sale, because I was really in the midst of so much negativity. I was filled with happiness, and I was grateful, and I was thankful, and just very positive. And then when I did retire from teaching and I made the move from the Chicago suburbs to the Caribbean, I continued finding my survivor's voice and my author's voice. And I wrote a 5-book series called True Deceit, False Love, which creatively addresses, the family trauma dynamics that I had mentioned. And that has been very healing, and I guess, very well received by a lot of people that have found themselves in this kind of situations. But I will say there is hope, and there's, inspiration that you can survive all sorts of challenges in your life. And I've done just that. I'm living a blessed life, um, filled with love and happiness. Yes, I have to acknowledge losses in my life. I've had to make some tough choices about who
Hmm.
I let in my life, who I keep in my life. But I'm enjoying every single day, and I am grateful and thankful for all the blessings I've been given.
You touched on a lot things that I was going to ask you about. So I'm gonna bring it back just a little bit.
Sure.
And the one, so you found yourself in a decision point, I guess, in your life, right? You were married, and but you
Right.
weren't in that space, and then you made a decision to leave.
Yes.
So in that time, you said that kind of, probably not that specifically, but something motivated you to start writing. You wrote the book,
Well,
God
God
Came to
came
My
to my
Garage
garage.
Sale.
Yes. Yes. And it
Right.
was around that same time. It was
Oh,
really
really?
a watershed moment. I had this garage sale where I lost everything. I was losing my house,
Okay.
but I really was filled, like I said, with love and gratitude. Um, didn't really realize what was in store for me in the future as far as the domestic abuse and financial abuse and the parental alienation,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
had to face. But I I did become a writer then because I had something to say. I had some spiritual miracles that happened that
Hmm.
were just so profound and life changing, prompted me as a lifelong learner to kind of look into spiritual transformations and awakenings and even near death experiences to try to understand what I went through. And so that really was the start of my writing journey.
Good. And is that writing, or has that writing been therapeutic?
Oh, so much so. Yes, it's really wonderful to kind of get your thoughts and feelings, emotions, positive and negative,
Right.
out of your physical body and onto a page. It's a very safe activity to do when you're trying to make sense of what you've gone through. And so there were many, many different versions of that first book. And I'm pleased to say that the first book, actually doesn't even address domestic violence or financial abuse or anything really negative. It's really about an an atheist woman's journey to experiencing signs and synchronicities of the universe and really questioning, hey, is there something more on this earth that's going on? Because really, I should have been in a real negative, dark place, but I wasn't. I was filled with love and positivity.
Right.
So that started my journey, but it wasn't until, moving to the Caribbean and kind of getting out of that survival mode situation, which takes years to recover from, that I really needed to do some more deep reflection about, what did I go through? And I needed to kind of understand, you know,
Hmm.
the experiences I had
Right.
and so that's what led me to the 5-book series, True Deceit, False Love.
So during your reflection, what did you find out? What was the most profound thing you found out about yourself?
Well, I would say the most profound thing was that, I knew I was a strong person. I knew that
Okay.
I could choose to rise above negative situations. But I guess the most profound thing that I found out was that, I had some intergenerational family traumas that were unaddressed
Mm.
and that I needed to come face to face with, even in midlife, to sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together to connect the dots. That my I didn't just find myself in this situation; it was a journey that brought me to where I was at, and that I was responsible for some of that journey. I was an overgiver, a people pleaser. I was kind of, my foundation kind of set me up to be a target. And I needed to do that inner reflection and make some changes about, my boundaries. And so that was probably the most profound, because really we can't control what other people do or what situations are put in our path. We can only choose to respond a certain way, and we can only control our own behavior. And so we can be dealt terrible challenges. So
Hmm.
many people have experienced adversity that takes on so many different forms. Even if your listeners can't totally relate to the family trauma situation, which that would be great if they can't. However, it sort of seems that most everyone has some issues within in families that need to be addressed or resolved.
Right. Right.
We if anyone says to you they had a perfect family and everything was just 100% perfect, they're probably not being 100% honest,
Right.
because but that's okay, because we're all on a different path and we're all at our awakening, and our awareness at different times in our lives. I'm so very thankful that my light bulb moment, about the true deceit and false love that I was dealing with, happened when it happened, and it didn't happen when my children were young and minors, because it really could have played out in a very, um, in a more negative way than it already did. I mean, it's pretty negative when you don't have your children in your life for almost a decade.
Right.
That's devastating. But I'm at a point where I can understand it now, because I've learned about parental alienation. I've learned about Stockholm syndrome. I've learned about abusers and narcissism, and what they do to align and coercively control. I can make sense of it more. But boy, if this happened when my kids were little, and there
Mm.
were legal custody battles, and there are already a lot of lies and false narratives that happen legally, it would have been even worse knowing the person who I was dealing with if my kids were even younger.
I'm gonna go back to the book, and I appreciate you sharing your
Sure.
personal journey. So in the book, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Were
Yeah.
you the atheist woman in the story?
Oh, yes. Most fiction is really based on some true experiences. And yes, I did have an atheist background as a child growing up. I, little by little, on my own,
Hmm.
really believed that there had to be more, to explain all sorts of things, even our physical bodies and our the systems within our bodies, how perfect we are made. I always, in my heart of hearts, believed that there was some sort of divine source, and didn't explore that until I was an adult.
Okay.
Um, and did get involved in the church, and you know was baptized and even became a lector. At this point, I have steered away from organized religion personally. I'm
Hmm.
more spiritual, but I do believe in God. Um, but, so really, yes, it's about an atheist woman. But, when I was going through this big transition in my life, leaving a marriage after 27 years and losing everything. I wasn't an atheist at that time, but it was perfect for the story, that it was a questioning person. I would say
Mm.
actually agnostic at that point, wondering, with all these miracles that happen, if God really existed, and if God really came to the garage sale. But I will tell you,
Hmm.
Lee, all the spiritual experiences and many, many of the accounts I write about all really happened. I mean, they are all inspired by true events. Just the names and locations have been changed to protect the innocent.
Well, so that we don't infringe on the innocent. Can you share one of your experiences, maybe the first one or the one that got your attention?
Yeah, and I'm happy to, and I do talk about this one a lot, because it was so very profound. But I will say all of the experiences were profound, and they were all when I was in a state of gratitude, and kind of almost in a meditative state, and
Okay.
everything happened in slow motion with all the different experiences that I had. There was like no time. I couldn't, what felt to me hours or days actually would have only been minutes. Um, in reality. But
Okay.
one experience was I was looking back at my home from the cul-de-sac, right around the garage sale time, and I was all of a sudden a dragonfly circled me, and I thought that's pretty cool. And then there were like five, and I thought, well, that's neat, but I didn't think too much of it. But very shortly, I was surrounded by 50 and to what I believe 100 dragonflies,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, kind of in a state of awe. I was not like overly excited. I was not skeptical. I was not questioning. I was not scared. I think if that would have happened to me when I wasn't in a state like this, I'd be like freaking out, trying to run away from, the bugs. Um, kind of just like what I do in the Caribbean when I see some bugs and snakes and things that I'm, not that
Yeah.
comfortable with. I mean, my first reaction is to scream and run. But I didn't do that when I had this dragonfly experience, and it was slow motion in that I could see the dragonflies like fly down the block of my neighborhood and come on back and circle me. And, it was so slow that I could see the veins of the wings and the iridescent colors. And there were different sizes that I personally at that time equated with people. Like they were babies
Mm.
and toddlers and teenagers and young adults and grandparents. And I just felt like I was surrounded by love and that I was supported and that all of these dragonflies, these
Mm-hmm.
generations of ancestors, knew I was making a big life change and were just kind of swarming me to reassure me that, I was okay and that I would be okay. And luckily, about three-quarters of the way through, I started to kind of come back to earth or come back to my awareness. And I knew to pull out my cell phone and videotape this. So I actually have documentation that, yeah, there
Mm-hmm.
were 100 dragonflies around me. And this wasn't, some dream state or hallucination that I had. It really happened. And then I went on to research dragonflies and actually learned of other people that have had dragonfly experiences that were very similar, and as a result of kind of a life-changing trauma that prompted this kind of encounter. So that
Right.
was one pretty major experience that happened early on that was life-changing, and I think almost opened me up to having numerous other experiences. And it wasn't until after many, many experiences and doing some research and learning about these kinds of things that I was putting it all together that, I was really being bombarded, with
Hmm.
this awareness that there was something more going on here.
I see a dragonfly. I see like one every so often. So to be surrounded
Yeah,
by 50 to 100, that is an event in itself. And then for
definitely.
you to take the opportunity to let yourself go, right, and then embrace the moment and feel that energy and understand and research. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it was amazing. So much so, and actually, many people that have transformative experiences that make them question our existence on Earth, they're compelled to talk about it. They're compelled to write about it. And I was, I mean, I suppose as an educator, and I've had a lot of experience writing and reading. I never really sought out to be an author. Um, there would be times in my life I would say, wow, that would make a good book or that would be a good story. But now, through that experience and then my 5 book series, and now writing, blogs for various magazine articles and that type of thing, I really have found that writing is something I really enjoy, and it's pretty well received by people who are reading it.
If someone were to come to you, or if they come to you and ask for advice or support on different things, and if so, what is the most common request for support that you receive from your listeners or from your readers?
Well, I'm not someone that offers personal advice. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a certified, you know, therapist of any kind. And so, I really don't feel it's my place to do so. I have been asked by numerous people to be on podcasts like yours because they find my story and my books interesting, and I'm very happy to talk about it that way. I'm an extremely private person now after some of the experiences I've gone through. So even though there's a contact page on my website, it's certainly not for individual advice. I'm an author
Right.
and I put my thoughts down on paper in books, and then I'm happy to talk about um, my views on things when I'm on podcasts, when I have speaking engagements. Certainly when I have a book signing, there are people that ask about both my spiritual fiction as well as my 5-book series, True Deceit False Love. I would say the questions they vary that people have. So spiritually, they want to know really what are some of the experiences that happened, how did that change you? There are other people that want to write themselves and they want to know, how do you get started writing a book? I want to be an author. What are the first steps? And I'm happy to talk about that. And I've participated in some writing workshops where I've given suggestions. I'm just one person who has followed through on my passion of writing, and so I'm just one perspective from many others. I really
Right.
suggest that people that have specific questions about being an author, they can hear what my approach was, but check out so many other people and what they did, and then come to your own conclusion of what you want to do. And then with the family trauma series, the biggest question I think I get are, it's like, how could you stay in a marriage for almost 3 decades? Didn't you know that there was something wrong? And that's the biggest question. And yes, I did know that things were not, my values were not aligned with who I was with. I just ignored the red flags, and I chose to stay busy. I chose to think the best of whoever I was around. I certainly wanted to provide safety and stability for my 2 adult children. So I didn't want to, I really considered, should I just go along status quo and stay in this, even though, a lot of unethical,
Yeah.
immoral things were presented to me? Should I just ignore this? And I found that I couldn't ignore it because I need to continue to be a wonderful role model for my children.
Right.
Even though my adult children are not in my life, I'm still out there publicly spreading the word of love and light and goodness and compassion and forgiveness. And I think, how I'm choosing to respond to some horrific situations is a testament to goodness. And my adult children, along with anyone else that's listening, where so many of us have experienced challenging times, whether it's with our health, our job, our family, our relationships, our homes, all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
People have challenges, but we can choose to respond in a positive way that doesn't contribute to the negativity, to that would just spiral down. And, I just don't believe in handling challenges that way. And sometimes, there are people that want to engage in the antagonistic chaos of confrontation, and they just have other motives, and sometimes it's best to just walk away from that, and that's not how you operate, or that's not how I operate. And I
Right.
don't want to engage in that, and we have to give ourselves permission to stay true to our values, and not worry so much about external validation, and pleasing others. We have to really kind of look at ourselves and what's best for us, and
Isn't
and
that
what's
amazing?
best for everyone in general. In fact, even sometimes when you walk away from someone that wants to engage in something very negative, and your light bulb went on where you're trauma bonded or whatever, and the best thing is to kind of step back and put up those boundaries. Indirectly you might be doing them a favor as well, because with them not wanting you to walk away, they might have to look at themselves and make some changes. Just like,
Right.
I had to do for myself. When I walked away, I had to look at myself and make some changes. And that, I think, leads towards self-actualization.
Mm. I don't even have to ask you questions because you
You have a lot
you
to say, huh?
and no, it's not that you have a lot to say, but you have a lot of good things to say, right? So there are things the things that you're saying are good pieces of advice to everyone. Basically one major one is you can only really control how you respond to things. You can't
Right.
control how someone else responds to things, right? You can only control how you respond um, to things, right? You have to, at times, take a step back and assess yourself, assess
Right.
your morals, assess your beliefs, and are they still in alignment with, maybe your socialization, your upbringing, right? And just, make sure everything is in alignment. Because we get out there in the world. I mean, we all do. We're out in the world, and things kind of change your compass direction, right? Your bearing gets off a little bit, and you have to take that time and reassess yourself.
Sometimes stuff happens.
Yeah,
and and you
exactly.
can't, and you can't control that, but you can control yourself. And you have to realize, um with that kind of reconnection to yourself, and moving towards more self internal validation, you'll realize that there will be some significant losses. Some people that you have always thought were, your tried and true friends that would always be there for you, may not be there for you. and
Right.
and your values may not align, and they may not have your back like you thought they did, and so your circle can get smaller and smaller and smaller. But the more you stay true to those values, you're living a more authentic life
Right.
and being true to who you really are, and to honesty, goodness, and compassion, and just realizing, hey, sometimes enough is enough, and you need to make some changes and take care of yourself.
Right. For me personally, and then anybody else, right? The sooner you can come to that realization, right, the better off you'll be, the better decisions you'll make. That's my whole thing. So, like, for hindsight, the podcast, I really like to look at, say, where you are now, where you want to be, and where you were, right? And then if
Right.
you kind of know where you want to get to, then you can adjust your decision making or your mental on making the correct decisions to get to that point, instead of just as things come to you, make decisions, right? Because that's when you kind of go astray.
Right. I mean, it's cool if you can do some planning, but it's good to kind of have an idea of where you want to go. But the reality is life happens, and we're constantly in a state of flux and flexibility, and we have to adjust, you know, um, we have to adjust our sails when we're
I
out
like
there
it.
on the ocean.
I like that. I like it. One final bit of, and I appreciate you acknowledging that you are an author. You write and you do your own self therapy, right? And maybe that can help
Pretty
somebody,
much.
maybe it doesn't, right? But if you
Right.
had one thing that you can just tell my audience right now, something profound or something, just advice or something, this is your time. What would that be?
I would say to your audience, you are a beautiful, loving human being. And we need to turn some of that love inward towards ourselves, and, treat ourselves, just as good as we might treat other people.
Mm,
And realize that we all have challenges and adversity, but we have the power to control how we respond to them. And in addition, you know, get back to your passions and what makes you tick and what brings you joy. And you might find that there are others that you resonate with. And that's a good thing. We might have to adjust where we came from. And then with hindsight, looking back, we can actually be moving forward to to a more fulfilling and happy life.
right. Oh, thank you so much. That is all the questions that I have. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Marnie. You can find out more about Dr. Marnie and her books at www.godcametomygaragesale.com. And do you have any social media
No, I
links?
am not on social
I
media.
know you said you're not.
No, I've got my hands full just with keeping up with my website, because on my website, in addition to my books and the people who have endorsed my books, I mean, they're resources in themselves to check out, the people who have endorsed my books. But I have a happenings section that I keep up to date with different podcast interviews, book signings, speaking engagements. But I also highlight other people and what they are doing.
Yeah.
um, you know, um, a friend of mine, Tracy Malone, who has written, an amazing book about divorcing your narcissist, providing resource and support and meetup groups and all sorts of things to help people that are in challenging abusive situations. She just came out today with a couple new books that are journals to help people write their own story if they find that writing is helpful for them.
Hmm.
So I would check out some of the resources that I put on my website of other people and what they are doing. Because it really takes a village. There are many different
Yeah.
approaches to handling challenges, and one size doesn't fit all. And
Right.
so check out my website, www.godcametomygaragesale.com, and
Abs-
um, and see what I have there. You might resonate with something there.
Dr. Marnie, I really appreciate your message of love. It is very, very needed in the world and environment. It's always needed, right? But
Right,
just
but
even more so right now. So I definitely,
definitely,
yeah,
definitely.
appreciate that
Let's
approach.
let the goodness and the honesty and the truth prevail, so we can, live as we are supposed to.
Definitely, we could get so much accomplished if we were all on the same sheet of music, but
Right.
we'll never figure that out.
Oh, I think goodness prevails. The truth
Yeah,
eventually comes out, and at some point, the people that have malevolent intentions, their mask slips, and they're exposed. They actually expose themselves, and so goodness does prevail, and truth eventually comes out.
are you working on any new books?
I am. I have a sixth book in the True Deceit, False Love series that I'm working on. And I'm actually scaling back on my podcast interviews for the end of this year, because I have some other exciting literary endeavors in 2023 that I'm going to focus on. So I've been very, very busy and sort of out there almost on a daily basis, having wonderful conversations with wonderful people like you. And but
Thank you.
I'm ready to kind of shift my focus on some other writing activities and interests that I have. And I'm actually hoping God Came to My Garage Sale will be part of a movie, part of a film, and I'm in talks with people regarding that. So,
Oh,
it might take on another direction, which would be very cool.
absolutely. Continued success in with all the writings and the different things that you're doing. I love the message of love, like I said earlier, and I will be looking forward. Definitely want to see the movie of
Yeah.
the God Came to My Garage Sale. That seemed like that could be a very powerful movie, and I'm gonna thank myself and yourself for making this happen, since now that I know that you're about to scale back on the interviews. So I feel
Yeah,
lucky that I was
yeah.
able to get you in before you actually stopped it and stopped writing. But
Right.
I will stay in tune with you and continue to monitor and watch your journey.
Well, thank you, Lee, and thank you so much for having me on Hindsight the podcast. It's just been an honor to have this conversation with you.
Hindsight is 2020, hindsight is key. To learn that, you don't need no type of degree. Learn from the past, see what the present gon' be. I'm a wise man, look at these blessings on me. Hindsight is 2020, hindsight is key. To learn that, you don't need no type of degree. Learn from the past, see what the present gon' be. I'm a wise man, look at these blessings on me.